If you've ever felt unheard, unseen, or like the wounds from your past still hold you back, you're not alone. This space is for you. Here, we heal, we grow, and we rediscover who we truly are. Beyond the pain, beyond the past. And if you're ready to step into your healing journey and finally embrace your authentic self, hit that subscribe button.
It then follows that if you change that relationship to yourself, you can have an impact on that process that the disease represents. And that's what I believe is actually going on. Love is supposed to be a two-way valve. It's supposed to flow in both directions. When it only flows towards others and you ignore your own needs, then you're taking on way too much stress in this life, and it's going to tell on your health. So nothing wrong with loving others. We're meant to do that. But when we're loving others by chronically suppressing our own needs, where we are always afraid of disappointing others, our own needs are compulsively ignored, that's a quick route to disease. 70–80% of autoimmune disease happens to women, which is an incredible proportion. And if you look at something like multiple sclerosis, the gender ratio back in the 30s was about 1:1, but now it's more than 3 women for every man. And you can't explain it, as you say, genetically, because genes don't change in the population over 80 years. And so something's going on here. You have to understand the mind-body unity. Like, again, this is one of those well-kept scientific secrets. I mean, scientifically, there's no doubt, in fact, it's beyond doubt, that mind and body are inseparable, that the emotional apparatus in the brain and the immune system and the hormonal system and the nervous system are not even separate systems that are connected. They're one unit, different manifestations of the same unit. So let's take something like anger. As an adult, if I were to intrude on your space in a hostile or threatening way, at some point, you'd want to get angry with me. My space, get out. That's healthy anger. So healthy anger is a boundary defense. It just keeps you from being invaded and being intruded upon. We have a circuit in our brain for anger. Anger is not a bad thing. All mammals have anger circuitry in their brain. Why? Because it helps them defend their territories. You're in my space, get out. It's healthy. In fact, it prevents conflict. Because if I mount a big anger display, we might not come to blows. So anger is a boundary defense, right? So what is the role of the immune system? It's a boundary defense. The immune system keeps out that which is unhealthy and toxic and bacteria and so on, and allows in nutriments and vitamins and healthy bacteria, whatever is good for health. So both the immune system and the emotional system have the same role, you see, to let in what is nurturing and to keep out what is toxic. That's the role of the emotional system. That's the role of the immune system. When something happens emotionally, it's going to have an impact on the immune system as well. So the people that suppress themselves emotionally because they're programmed to do so, not because it's their fault, but because that's how they survived their childhoods. Those people that suppress their emotions, then naturally it's going to have an impact on the immune system, and it does. So the immune system will either fail to protect you, or it'll actually, just like anger that you repress, turns against you in the form of self-loathing and self-criticism and shame. In the same way, the immune system can turn against you, and now you got autoimmune disease. And if you look at it from a cultural point of view, which group in this society is a culture related to take on other people's stresses, to swallow their own needs, not to express them, not to be angry, to take on responsibility for looking after their partners and their families. It's women. That's one of the patriarchal determinations of the female role in this society. And you wonder then that women are much more prone to autoimmune disease. Physicians don't understand any of this. They don't know what I'm talking about. As a profession, I mean, only because they're not taught the science. So my knock on my profession isn't that there's too much science, there's not enough science. There's a huge swath of science that we just don't ignore, that we ignore. Language is very important, how we talk about things. So when we say, I have cancer, or I have ADHD, or I have depression, or I have rheumatoid arthritis, there's an assumption in that way of talking. The assumption is that there's this thing, there's an entity called the disease, then there's another entity, me, and this entity, me, has this other entity. So I have this glass. The glass has got nothing to do with me. It's not part of me. It's not a manifestation of who I am. It's simply an object that I have. I can use it, put it down, give it away. Shatter it. That's not going to change me in any way at all. But what if disease is not an entity that has a life of its own? What if disease, like when you go to a doctor and say, you got this disease, here's the prognosis. That assumes that the life is a disease of its own, which is totally independent of your life. It's a thing that you have. It's an entity that somehow entered you, and now you have it. But what if it's not an entity? What if it's a process? What if it's a process that manifests your life? What if it's a process that manifests how you were carried in your mother's womb? What happened to you as a child? What beliefs you developed about yourself? What if it reflects your relationships with the world, with your community, with your family, with your culture? And above all, what if it manifests your relationship to yourself? That it's a process that manifests all these dynamics. It then follows that if you change that relationship to yourself, you can have an impact on that process that the disease represents. And that's what I believe is actually going on. It's a process, it's not a thing, it doesn't have a life of its own necessarily. I'm not saying everything is curable, it's just not that simple, but it is a process, and insofar as you change what goes into that process, you can have significant influence on that process in many, many, many cases. And you can certainly prevent it from coming on by understanding. More and more people are getting sick, more addicted, more people are dying of overdoses. The problem in our society is there's very little that actually promotes healing, and there's very much that undermines it. This society loves you to be addicted, feeling inadequate. This path towards wholeness is this addiction that I have is not a disease that I inherited, but it's my attempt to escape from pain. And the more I learn about that pain, the less I'll inflict those imprints on myself and on the way. So that's a traumatic imprint. And what happens is that when trauma acts up, the midfrontal cortex, the part that's rational and can respond in the present moment, goes offline. And these traumatic imprints show up and they govern your behavior. So all of a sudden, just as you say, I start acting like a hurt little child. Healing of trauma is in learning to recognize and cope with these imprints. But the lack of that healing shows up in society, in every realm, in medicine, in health, in mental health, in the pop culture, in politics, in economics, everywhere.
Right.
There's a rise in autoimmune disease. Autoimmune disease are conditions where the immune system turns against itself. So, and starts destroying. The immune system, which is meant to protect us, turns against us and starts destroying our bodies. Now, examples are rheumatoid arthritis, scleroderma, lupus, chronic fatigue, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, chronic psoriasis, autoimmune eczema. One could go on. This is rising in this society. And not only is it rising in a society, as the globalized economic system takes over more of the world, it's rising internationally. And it's rising particularly amongst women. autoimmune disease, it's always related to stress, and particularly people's coping styles. So people with autoimmune disease typically repress their emotions. They don't know how to be in contact with their healthy anger. They tend to suppress their real selves to fit in with society and with their families. And essentially, when people don't experience their healthy anger, their anger doesn't go away. It gets suppressed, turns against themselves. Now, our emotional apparatus is very much connected to our immune system. In fact, they're part and parcel of the same system. When our emotions turn against us, our immune system can turn against us as well.
Mm-hmm.
In this society, because so many people are not allowed to be themselves, they have to kind of suppress who they are in order to survive and fit in, we're getting more and more autoimmune disease, is my view. Lots of evidence for that. Yeah. So I've worked in all areas of medicine, from delivering babies to palliative care, looking after terminally ill people. So I've seen a lot of disease as a physician. What's surprising to me is that some people who should resent their illness, we all would naturally, nobody wants to get sick, they found that the disease is actually a teacher to them, because the disease pointed out to them how they were not living a life that was authentic, how they were living a life of self-suppression. An example is a very well-known one. Anita Moorjani, who wrote a book called Dying to Be Me. She was literally on the verge of death. And she was terminally ill. She wasn't going to live. And then she had this near-death experience, and she finds out that all her life she had not been herself. That's why the title, Dying to Be Me. At the death's door, she realizes that she needs to be authentically herself, and she actually recovers. And so that the disease taught her to be herself. I give the example of the great dramatist and writer V, formerly known as Eve Ensler, who has stage 4 uterine cancer. She found her disease taught her essentially to be herself. I've met people, even in terminal illness, who are not going to recover, who did not recover, who said, what I learned was so precious, I'm grateful for my disease. I've met people with addictions who said, I wouldn't wish this on anybody, but my God, did it teach me?
Yeah, that idea, the grateful alcoholic notion. It's tricky, though. I mean, this is a sensitive thing, because to tell somebody or to announce that your disease is your teacher when someone is in grave suffering, it's sort of how dare you,
I don't tell anybody that. Yeah. I don't tell anybody that. I just give examples of people who have found it that way. But it's not for me to tell somebody else with their illness, you should be happy. This is a teacher for you. I wouldn't want anybody to tell me that, for God's sakes. I'd be very angry if they did. So it's not that we should tell people how they should feel, but it's to point out the possibilities inherent in terms of what an illness can offer people. If people choose to go that way, that's their call. If they don't choose to go that way, I totally understand it. And then there's the larger issues of, when you look at the scientific literature on stress, and by stress I mean emotional factors that affect your physiology, your immune system and your hormones and everything. What are they? The major factors for stress are uncertainty, loss of control, lack of information, and conflict. Now, in this society, how many people are living with loss of control, uncertainty, lack of information, insecurity, and conflict? This system is almost designed to make people feel insecure. And, for example, at the time of the economic crisis, they looked at young people in Greece as compared with Sweden, which wasn't having an economic crisis. The stress hormone levels of the young Greeks were really affected by what's going on economically. And that promotes inflammation. And the researchers said that this is going to affect the future health of these young Greeks. This is a social issue. It wasn't an individual biological problem restricted to a single human being. It was a social issue inflicted by social, political, and economic conditions. And that happens on a massive scale under globalized capitalism to a lot of people.
Right.
Well, I could speak a whole hour about the impact of the devices, about how the devices themselves are designed to keep people addicted, including very young kids. That's a separate issue. The issue of loneliness. So if you look at the number of people who describe themselves as being lonely, in the United States, that's doubled within 20 years. And loneliness is as major a factor for physical illness as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, or as high blood pressure or obesity. And loneliness has been spreading in the Western world, again, under the impact of a globalized economic system that pits people against one another, that says that competition and aggression and mistrust of others is the way to survive, and which has, in many, many ways, documented ways, eroded communities and extended families and has cut down on people's sense of community. Loneliness is going up, and that's posing a major risk factor. People who are lonely get sicker faster, and they die sooner of their diseases. So that's a major problem in Western societies.
Healing takes time, and you don't have to do it alone. If this message resonated with you, know that your journey matters. Be gentle with yourself. Keep exploring and surround yourself with support. If you haven't yet, subscribe and join this community. We're in this together. And before you go, comment, "I am healing to affirm your growth. You are seen, you are valued, and you are not alone."